You have probably been told your whole life that you need to focus. Pick one thing, choose one path, stop jumping around, stop being so scattered. And maybe, for a while, you believed them. You looked at your life and saw music, writing, business, psychology, design, coding, filmmaking, language learning, and that one random week where you became convinced you were going to understand ancient architecture. Instead of feeling inspired by all of that, you felt embarrassed. Because society has a very specific picture of success. One person, one path, one ladder, one clean LinkedIn headline that does not require a paragraph of explanation. So when your mind keeps pulling you toward different things, it can feel like something is wrong with you. You ask yourself, why can't I just pick one thing and become great at it? But what if the problem is not that you have too many interests? What if the problem is that you were taught to organize your life in a way that only works for people with one dominant interest? What if your curiosity is not a weakness, but an operating system? Having too many interests can look like a flaw in a world built for narrow specialization. But in the right environment, it becomes one of your biggest advantages. The world does not only reward people who know one thing deeply, it also rewards people who can connect things that were never supposed to touch. The person who understands psychology and marketing can explain why people buy things they do not need. The person who understands music and editing can create videos that feel emotionally alive. The person who understands business and storytelling can turn a boring idea into something people actually care about. Your interests are not random. They are raw material. The mistake is judging each interest separately and asking, can this become my career? But the better question is, what does this interest teach me that I can carry somewhere else? Because the real advantage of having many interests is not that every interest becomes a job. It is that every interest gives you a new way to see. Think of your mind like a city. A specialist builds one very tall tower, and that tower can be incredibly valuable. But a multi-interested person builds bridges. One bridge connects art to business. Another connects psychology to storytelling. Another connects technology to education. At first, those bridges might look messy. But over time, they become the reason you can travel where other people cannot. This is why some of your best ideas come when two unrelated things suddenly collide in your head. You watch a documentary about ants, and suddenly you understand teamwork differently. You learn a piano chord progression, and suddenly video editing rhythm makes sense. You read about childhood memory, and suddenly you understand why a brand campaign feels nostalgic. That is not distraction. That is connection. But having many interests is only an advantage if you learn how to manage them. Without structure, curiosity becomes chaos. Without depth, you become the person who starts everything but cannot use anything. The world sees your unfinished projects, open tabs, half-read books, saved online courses, and the app you downloaded at 2:17 in the morning to become a completely new person. And it says, you lack discipline. But often, that is not the full truth. The truth is that your brain is constantly scanning for meaning. It is asking, what does this connect to? What would happen if I combined this with that? Your mind is not empty. It is overfed. So the goal is not to kill your curiosity. The goal is to give it a shape. There is a difference between a pile and a pattern. A pile is when your interests sit on top of each other with no relationship. Guitar, design, psychology, photography, investing, philosophy. Nothing connects. Nothing compounds. Everything feels temporary. A pattern is when those same interests begin to form a larger identity. Maybe you are not just interested in writing, psychology, YouTube, and storytelling. Maybe your larger pattern is explaining human behavior in a way that helps people understand themselves. Maybe you are not just interested in business, design, technology, and culture. Maybe your larger pattern is building things that feel useful and emotionally intelligent. The interests are the dots. The pattern is the picture. And the mistake most people make is trying to choose the perfect dot before they understand the picture. This is why having too many interests feels so painful. You are not only choosing what to do, you are trying to choose who you are. And that is too much weight to place on one hobby, one major, one job, or one decision. The people who turn many interests into an advantage stop asking, which interest should replace all the others? They start asking, which interests are trying to work together? You do not need one passion. You need a central theme. A passion can change. A theme can hold many passions. When you find the theme, you stop feeling like 10 different people fighting for control of one life. You start realizing they may all be different expressions of the same deeper drive. A person with one interest becomes strong in one language, but a person with many interests becomes a translator between worlds. And translators are valuable because real problems are rarely neat. They are human, technical, emotional, financial, creative, and practical all at once. But you still need depth. Curiosity gives you range. Depth gives you credibility. Range lets you see connections. Depth lets other people trust you with those connections. Without depth, your ideas can become interesting but fragile. You can talk about many things, but you cannot build much with them. You become someone who collects beginnings, and beginnings are exciting. The first week of learning something feels amazing. You discover new words, new tools, new possibilities. Then comes the boring middle. The exercises repeat. The progress slows. The fantasy fades. You are no longer becoming a genius. You are just practicing. And this is where many curious people leave, not because they are lazy, but because the emotional reward disappears. Every interest has two phases, the spark phase and the skill phase. The spark phase is where curiosity gets you started. The skill phase is where discipline makes the interest useful. Most people with too many interests do not need to stop having sparks. They need to choose which sparks deserve to become skills. Because not every interest needs to become serious. Some interests are allowed to be playgrounds. Some are allowed to be private joys that never become productive, profitable, or impressive. So divide your interests into three categories: anchors, bridges, and playgrounds. Your anchor is the skill you are willing to develop deeply enough that it can support your life. It might become your career, your business, your main craft, or your strongest professional identity. Your bridges are the interests that make your anchor more unique. If your anchor is video editing, psychology becomes a bridge because it helps you understand emotion and retention. Storytelling becomes a bridge because it helps you structure the video. Music becomes a bridge because it helps you control pacing and mood. Your playgrounds are the interests you explore without pressure. They keep your mind alive and give you unexpected ideas. This one distinction can remove so much guilt. The problem was never that you had too many interests. The problem was that you treated every interest like it needed to become an anchor. That is how curiosity turns into anxiety. You see one new thing and immediately ask, is this my future? Maybe it is not. Maybe it is just a bridge. Maybe it is just a playground. Not everything you love has to carry the weight of your identity. But your anchor does need commitment. You choose one anchor for this chapter of your life. Not forever, just for this chapter. For the next 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years, you say, this is the skill I am going to make real. You still allow yourself to explore other interests, but they no longer get to steal the steering wheel every week. They can sit in the passenger seat. They can make suggestions. But they do not drive. This is how you protect your advantage from becoming chaos. You do not become focused by deleting every other part of yourself. You become focused by giving each part a role. Real focus does not have to mean self-abandonment. It can mean choosing what leads now and what supports from the side. It is not a prison, it is an orchestra. Not every instrument plays the melody at the same time, but that does not mean the other instruments are useless. The goal is not to silence your interest. The goal is to conduct them. And once you start doing that, the thing you were ashamed of becomes the thing that makes your work memorable. Originality rarely comes from one isolated source. It often comes from unusual combinations. A lot of people can write. Fewer people can write with psychological depth, humor, visual rhythm, cultural awareness, and business understanding. A lot of people can make videos. Fewer people can combine education, pacing, emotion, comedy, and clear structure. The more useful combinations you build, the harder you are to replace. But to get there, you need to capture your curiosity before it disappears. A multi-interested mind is like a storm of sparks. Ideas come while walking, showering, studying, scrolling, listening to music, or trying to sleep at the worst possible time. If you do not catch them, they vanish. So build a simple idea bank. It can be a notes app, a notebook, Notion, Obsidian, Google Docs, anything. When something fascinates you, write down a sentence, a metaphor, a question, or a connection. Over time, these little notes become your private library of connections. One day, an old note will return at the perfect moment. That is when your past curiosity pays you back. So do not be so quick to shame the older versions of yourself. The version of you who studied something random for 2 weeks was not always wasting time. They were gathering material. The version of you who tried a hobby and moved on was not necessarily failing. They were learning what gives you energy and what does not. But there is still a danger. Some people use, I have many interests, as an excuse to avoid the discomfort of mastery. So be honest with yourself. Are you exploring because you are genuinely curious? Or are you escaping because the current thing became hard? Exploration expands you. Avoidance protects you from discomfort. Exploration leaves you with insight. Avoidance leaves you with shame. If every interest dies the moment you have to practice seriously, then your issue may not be having too many interests. It may be that you have not built trust with the boring middle yet, but if you keep returning to the same few themes again and again, pay attention. That repetition is not random. It might be your pattern trying to reveal itself. So instead of asking, "Why am I interested in so many things?" ask, "What are all these interests circling around?" Maybe you keep coming back to human behavior. Maybe you keep coming back to beauty. Maybe you keep coming back to systems. Maybe you keep coming back to helping people feel less alone. That is not scattered. That is a signal. Once you find the center, you no longer have to choose between all your interests like they are enemies. You can organize them like allies. Maybe having too many interests was never the thing holding you back. Maybe the real problem was that you were trying to turn a constellation into a straight line. A constellation only makes sense when you stop staring at one star and step back far enough to see the shape. So choose an anchor. Let your bridges support it. Let your playgrounds keep you alive. Capture your ideas. Watch for the theme that keeps returning. And stop apologizing for being someone with a wide mind. You do not need to become less curious to become successful. You need to become more intentional with your curiosity. Because in a world full of people trying to fit into the same narrow categories, the person who can connect different worlds becomes rare. And rare is valuable. A scattered person has many pieces and no pattern. A creative person has many pieces and learns how to arrange them. Your job is not to become one-dimensional. Your job is to build the shape that only your life could create. And when you finally do, you may realize that the thing you spent years trying to fix was actually the beginning of your biggest advantage. Thanks for watching. And if this video made your brain finally make a little more sense, take a few minutes today and write down your anchors, your bridges, and your playgrounds. You do not need to solve your whole life tonight. Just start seeing the pattern. I'll see you in the next one.